You don't have ties to Minnesota. So based upon that, here's what I'm going to do, which I believe promotes public safety. If you wish to be released without conditions, post $10,000 or $2,500 cash, $25,000 bond, and then you would be subject to these conditions. Sign a waiver of extradition, no use or possession of firearms, ammunition, or weapons. Notify your attorney if you get one, if you have a change in address or telephone number. Keep the peace, be of good behavior, be law-abiding, make your future court appearances. We'll talk about that in a moment. If you fail to appear, a new charge or a warrant would be issued. You are excluded from entering property or work sites that are owned, leased, or used by Enbridge or Michaels. Complete the booking process, if not already done, prior to release. Follow any conditions that you have in any other file. You need to set your next court appearance. We have hearings on Monday afternoons. On September 13th? So we'll set it for Monday, September 13th. That would be at 2 p.m. If you have a smartphone and you want to attend this next one by Zoom, you may do so. Otherwise, you can appear in person if you wish. And I'm signing a conditional release order. You'll get that down in the jail. And then would our jail staff please give Mr. LeClaire a waiver of extradition? All right. And Mr. LeClaire, thank you for signing that. And then we'll see you back here September 13th. Thank you, and this matter is adjourned. All right, to our next person in the jail, could I get your name, please?
Victor Portes.
Okay, hello, Mr. Portes. This is Judge Yan, and we will call your case next. This is State versus Victor Enrique Portes. This is file CR 21490. Mr. Portes is present. We also have Mr. Duffy on behalf of the state. And Mr. Portes, what I understand is that you've qualified for the public defender. And so going forward, you'll have an attorney representing you. I see we have Mr. Nestor back, but I understand you represent Hauska.
Your Honor, I'm appearing today on behalf of Mr. Puertas also.
Okay.
I did obtain his court file number, and we're in the process of filing a certificate of representation.
Okay, so Mr. Portes, would it be fair to say you are not seeking the public defender and instead hiring Mr. Nestor?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Portes, any questions about the charges or your rights? All right, and just to be clear, you have a felony theft, a gross misdemeanor trespass, and a misdemeanor obstruction. So you understand that's what you're charged with?
Oh yeah, sorry. I got a question about the test, felony test. I don't understand that, and I don't see why that applied to my case.
Your Honor, if I could ask to address that issue briefly on behalf of Mr. Puertas' behalf.
You may. Otherwise, I'd be happy to read the complaint to your client.
We would waive reading of the complaint, Your Honor. I have a copy of it. I do note that the court reviewed it and found probable cause on July 30th of this year. But I would ask the court to reconsider that finding of probable cause based on the four corners of the complaint. First of all, the charging language in count 1 refers only to 609.52.2 parentheses A parentheses 5I, which does not describe, it does not reference the actual act of theft, which the state alleges Mr. Puertas' actions showed an indifference to the property rights of. And that particular section of the theft statute refers to the fact that any of the other acts stated in the theft statute in which the intent was only a temporary taking and which represents an indifference is an act of theft. But the complaint is deficient because it doesn't specify the other act in the statute which is alleged to constitute theft. I would also note that the statement of probable cause attached to the complaint refers to a lost production value. The majority of the acts described as theft in the statute refer to the taking of property or movable property.
and lost production value would not constitute any movable property or property by the statutory definitions. To the degree that lost production value was seen as being services, potentially some of the theft of services statutes could apply, but there's no allegation that Mr. Puertas took possession of any services by deception or false information. Most of the theft of services statute apply to things such as cable television or telecommunications devices. And so even accepting the allegations as true, which we're prepared to do at this point, that Mr. Puertas intentionally interfered with the production of the work site, there's no allegation that he took or controlled of the property, and there's no statute cited in the complaint by which the court can find probable cause for a charge of felony theft. With respect to count 2, trespass on a critical infrastructure, utility, or pipeline, there's no allegation in the statement of probable cause that the work site had anything to do with a pipeline. The only work site describes it as Enbridge's work site area. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a pipeline existed there. And even if we want to somehow take judicial knowledge, which I don't believe is appropriate, that Enbridge is constructing a pipeline somewhere in the state of Minnesota, the act of constructing a pipeline doesn't meet the statutory definition of pipeline. A pipeline is a pipe above or below ground that is actually connected to a storage or distribution facility and used for the transportation or storage of gasoline or oil or other products such as that. Pipeline under construction is merely a bunch of pipeline on top of the ground or in the ground, not connected to a storage or distribution center. Beyond that, the statement of probable cause is simply deficient with respect to count 2. There's no allegation at all that would meet the definition of critical infrastructure or of a pipeline. And so we would ask that the court reconsider its finding of probable cause, dismiss count 1 and count 2, and then set conditions of release with respect to count 3.
Mr. Duffy?
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Nestor, Your Honor, we're not here to argue about an omnibus hearing or legal issues. He certainly will be able to file such a motion on behalf of his client. The court can hear those matters and determine them at that time. The court's seen the complaint. The court found that there's probable cause, and the state's ready to argue for conditions of release based off of 3 allegations that are contained within the complaint.
All right. Well, Mr. Nestor, you're certainly raising some interesting arguments. At this time, I'm denying the defense motion to dismiss count 1 and 2, although I expect it may be raised at a contested hearing down the road. But I'll note your arguments. And now, at this time, let's talk about conditions. Mr. Duffy, what are the state's recommendations, and then I'll turn to Mr. Nestor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state is going to ask the court to afford Puertas the following 2 options. You either post $100,000 cash without conditions of release, or he posts $10,000 cash with the following conditions. He notify his attorney and court administration of any change of address or telephone number within 24 hours. Keeps the peace, is of good behavior, and remains law-abiding. He makes all of his future court appearances. Do not possess any firearms, ammunition, or weapons. He trespassed from properties, work sites currently owned, leased, or being used by Enbridge or Michaels. He signed a waiver of extradition prior to his release. He completes the booking process if he's not already done so, and he follow any conditions, probation, or conditions of release in other cases that may have been previously imposed upon him. In reviewing Mr. Puertas' criminal history, Your Honor, I note that he has currently 2 pending charges for similar types of behaviors. One of them is out of Cass County, was filed on January 26, 2021. In that case, he's facing allegations for gross misdemeanor trespass upon a critical infrastructure. $6,000 bail has been posted in that case. He's also facing allegations from Hubbard County on March 26, 2021, in which $2,000 cash bail was posted in that for misdemeanor level offenses of obstruction, trespassing upon a construction site, and unlawful assembly. It appears to the state that Mr. Puertas is not going to follow any conditions imposed by the court. Clearly, he was ordered in the Hubbard County case not to trespass on any Enbridge properties, and even after posting cash bail is alleged. Certainly, Mr. Puertas enjoys the presumption of innocence throughout these matters, but it is alleged, Your Honor, that he's continuing to violate conditions previously posed upon him. The state believes that the conditions that are being asked for and the bail that is being requested is necessary to not only ensure his future court appearances, but deal with public safety.
All right, before I turn to Mr. Duffy, what were those financial conditions you were requesting? I think you must have
$100,000 cash without, or $10,000 cash with.
Mr. Nestor?
Your Honor, respecting that the court made a decision with respect to my arguments about count 1 and 2, I would still ask the court to take those arguments into consideration in setting conditions of release. Certainly the most serious charge here, the felony theft charge, appears on its face to be a stretching of the statute. I've never heard before that driving a truck up to a construction gate and chaining yourself to the truck might be behavior that we don't want occurring, and that the courts punish some other way, but it just doesn't ring of theft. It doesn't sound like theft. So it sounds like the state is concocting a felony here for the purpose of demanding extremely onerous conditions of release for Mr. Puertas, and we ask that the court take those matters into consideration. I would note that the Cass County matter, for instance, which is cited by Mr. Duffy, I also represent Mr. Puertas on. On that, he's basically alleged to have gotten out of a vehicle, stepped into the right-of-way and taken a photo of himself holding an Enbridge, a stop Enbridge Line 3 site. Certainly not conduct which poses a threat to the public peace or to public safety. And so we would, finally, I would note that what co-defendants have said about conditions in the Pennington County Jail would at least support concern by Your Honor as to whether detainees in Pennington County are being subjected to religious discrimination, being provided Christian reading materials, but not materials from Native American religions or the Islamic faith, that they're being denied medical care, they're being denied appropriate food, and are being subjected to retaliatory placement, disciplinary segregation by asking for medical care, appropriate food, and non-Christian reading materials. And so imposing onerous conditions of release that might result in Mr. Puertas being kept in the Pennington County Jail would put him at risk of deprivation of his civil liberties, and we believe should also be considered by the court. And so we would ask that he be released on $1,000 cash bail plus conditions.
Right. Well, Mr. Puertas, you are presumed innocent, but we look at these allegations and other criminal history. You're presumed innocent on those cases. I don't expect that those have been concluded yet. And the state's going to have to prove these. But there is a public safety concern, and you don't live in this state. So there is also no ties to the community. Based upon that, I'm going to set bail that I think is reasonable to promote public safety and ensure your appearance, not as high as what the state is recommending, but not as low as what your attorney is recommending. So here's what I'm going to do. If you wish to be released without conditions, post $50,000 cash or $500,000 bond, or $7,000 cash or $70,000 bond, and you'd be subject to the following conditions: sign a waiver of extradition, no use or possession of firearms, ammunition, or weapons, notify your attorney and the court if you have a change in address or telephone number, keep the peace, be of good behavior, be law-abiding, make your future court appearances. We'll talk about that in a moment. If you fail to appear for any scheduled court appearance, a new charge or a warrant would be issued. No entering property or work sites that are owned, leased, or used by Enbridge or Michaels. Complete the booking process prior to release. Follow any conditions you may have in any other file. Now, Mr. Puertas, did you receive a waiver of extradition form to sign? Please sign it and I will match you. All right, thank you.
The next hearing, I'll certainly defer to Mr. Nestor's calendar. I know that he's made some appearances for some other of these different is here, and so whatever setting is going to work best for him, I'll make it work for me.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. September 20th, Your Honor, would work fine, which is, I believe, the date that we picked in the other matter.
Okay, so Mr. Cortez, we're going to set what's called a Rule 8 appearance Monday, September 20th. Set it at 2 p.m. For this next type of hearing, if you have a smartphone, you may certainly appear using your phone, or you may come in person if you wish. And I'm signing a conditional release order. We'll make sure a copy of that gets to you down in the jail. Counsel, anything further on this case?
Do we need a waiver, Judge, if we're going to go out that far for a Rule 8?
Mr. Nestor, would your client agree to that?
Yes, Your Honor, my client would agree to waive the time periods for holding the Rule 8 hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Cortez. And this matter is adjourned. All right. We have another person in the jail. To this person, could I get your name, please?
Don Shimmick.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Shimmick. This is Judge Yan. We will call your case next. State versus John Henry Shimmick. This is file CR 21491. Mr. Shimmick is present. We also have Mr. Lacassiere on behalf of the state. And Mr. Shimmick, we are here because a new complaint was filed with 2 charges, gross misdemeanor trespass and obstruction of legal process. Do you have any questions about what the charges are?
None, Your Honor.
And did you get something called a statement of rights where it talked about right to remain silent, right to have an attorney, all of those rights?
I did.
Any questions about those rights?
None.
Were you wanting to hire an attorney or apply for the public defender?
I'll be hiring my own,
Okay.
Your Honor.
And just to be clear, the complaint lists your address at 36413 336th Avenue, Ogama, Minnesota?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have a telephone number where you can be reached?
218-401-2077.
All right. And then last thing, date of birth, February 26, 1983.
It is.
Okay. So the last thing for today is to talk about conditions of release and then set your next court appearance. So I'll start with Mr. Lacassiere and ask him for the state's recommended conditions. And then Mr. Shimmick, I will turn to you. Mr. Lacassiere?
Thank you, Your Honor. I note Mr. Shimmick's criminal history, a gross misdemeanor theft from 2001, gross misdemeanor obstruction from 2005, fifth-degree possession of drugs from 2005, felony receiving stolen property in 2006, a DWI in 2014, and a gross misdemeanor DWI in 2015. That being said, they are a little bit older, but they do cause some concern given the charges we have here. I would ask for $6,000 without conditions, or in the alternative, $1,000 with conditions that have been imposed in similar cases. I believe that there's a concern for public safety and a concern for Mr. Shimmick's reappearance in court based upon these. Thank you.
Mr. Shimmick?
I think that I should be given the same treatment as my other co-defendants, or most of my other co-defendants who are in the similar situation as mine.
All right, and here's what I'll say. You are presumed innocent. You do have a criminal history, although it doesn't appear to be recent or related to the allegations or similar allegations in what we're dealing with here. So based upon that, Mr. Shimmick, here's what I'm going to do. If you wish to be released without conditions, post $3,000, or I will release you on your own recognizance, subject to these conditions. Notify your attorney and the court of any change in address or telephone number. Keep the peace, be of good behavior, be law-abiding. Make your future court appearances. We'll talk about that in a moment. If you fail to appear for any scheduled court appearance, a new charge or a warrant would be issued. You are excluded from entering property or work sites that are owned, leased, or used by Enbridge or Michaels. Complete the booking process if not already done prior to release. Follow any conditions you may have in any other file. The court believes that this will promote the safety of yourself and others. Now, Mr. Shimmick, The next court appearance is something called a Rule 8 appearance. For that type of hearing, you may appear using your phone if you wish, or you could come in person. It's up to you. But we've been setting these on Mondays in September. We have the 13th, the 20th, or the 27th. Do you have any preference? All right, so let's set it for Monday, September 20th, and we'll set it at 2 p.m. And again, if you have a phone and you wish to appear by Zoom, you may do so. Otherwise, you may come in person. I'm signing a conditional release order. You'll get a copy of that down in the jail. Mr. Locasier, anything further on this case?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shimmick, and this matter is adjourned. All right, and then we have another person in the jail